And we're standing in front of the old manse, which was lived in by the Emerson family, the Hawthorne family, Peabody family, and Henry was the gardener here at various periods. One of Ralph Waldo Emerson's ancestors was actually living in the old manse here and watched the British troops come by here, go over and meet the Minutemen on the other side of the bridge, and this was the starting battle, the first battle really of the American Revolution. In Lexington, and of course Concord and Lexington have their issues. In Lexington, as the British troops had marched out in the pre-dawn overnight hours, did kill some Minutemen, but no British were killed at the Lexington Green. But here in Concord, dozens and dozens of British were killed. This was the first defeat of the British empires during many centuries, and was the start and the inspiration for revolutions in Haiti and France and many other places against colonial masters from overseas. So it's a very historic spot, and the Old North Bridge is protected here in the Minuteman National Historic Park, and it's a real symbol. And various U.S. presidents, unlike the current president, have made a pilgrimage here to the Old North Bridge to celebrate the founding of America. And just some pretty, this is, the orange is the butterfly bush. It's in the milkweed family and does attract a lot of butterflies in season, and they should be here pretty soon. But a nice little garden, some grapes here. We see some mountain laurel further on. A number of interesting plants. Behind us, those tall trees are black locusts. Those are not native to New England, but were brought to Massachusetts because the wood is very hard and was very useful in making fences and railroad ties, and was a utilitarian tree. It is native west of the Alleghenies, not native here. A bit of a problem in some areas, but even Henry had some black locust. Chipping sparrow singing. So one of Henry's essays was called Wild Apples, and at the Walden Pond Visitor Center every autumn we actually read through. We have a bunch of people get together and take turns reading his essay on all the different varieties of apples. Now, apples originated over in what we used to call Soviet Central Asia, like Afghanistan, and nearby Kyrgyzstan, and so forth, and it was brought over into Europe and eventually made it to America. But many, many different varieties of apples have been horticulturalized out here, and by September these are going to be bright red, and maybe you'd want to munch into one. And this was a boathouse. It may have been here in Henry's time, because remember, many of the people, they may have had a horse and carriage or a buggy, but many of the people did have canoes or some sort of watercraft to visit neighbors and just get away from everything. But here we are almost at the Concord River, very near the Old North Bridge. So here we are standing at one of the most important bridges in the world. It's been reconstructed several times, but it's apparently a genuine reproduction of the bridge that the British soldiers wished to cross because during the day of April 19th in 1775, the Minutemen had managed to amass a bunch of cannons and cannonballs that were hidden on a farm, Barrett's Mill Farm, about a little less than a mile west of here. And the British were out here to try to grab all these munitions from these troublemakers known as the Minutemen. But the troops had managed to organize themselves, and they came in from a dozen towns on the left side of this bridge here. And the impetus for the actual firing against their colonial master's army, known as the Regulars, remember Paul Revere said, "The regulars are coming, the regulars are coming." He did not say the British are coming, because we were still British at the time, legally. But then a fight took place here on an unusual circumstance. Things were much more open then, open fields and farms and cow pastures and so forth. And the people on the hill saw a column of smoke coming out of downtown Concord. And they knew there was troubles with the British because of the Boston Massacre and what they'd heard happened in Lexington and so forth. And they said, oh my God, they're burning down the town of Concord. And then they fired at the British here. And then the British retreated in a long and bloody battle, walking all the way back 20 miles to Boston with very heavy guns, heavy packs on what was a particularly hot and humid day like today. And that was false. The British were looking for hidden cannonballs, cannons, rifles, ammo. And there was a big pile of leaves and brush and stuff. And that's what they set on fire. They did not find any hidden armaments there in Concord, but it was that sort of false notion of thinking that the town was being burnt down by the British that caused the war to really start. And then British troops were followed all the way back through Lincoln and Lexington and Arlington, and then the war was definitely on. But it happened right at this very spot. And there go some kayakers. No kayaks down here in Henry's day. But it's interesting, these are rivers that flow to the north. Almost all of our rivers flow east, west, or south, but the Concord is one of the very few rivers that flows northward. And of course this was just a receding glacier valley, and as the glaciers receded, you know, whatever the number was, 12 to 18,000 years ago, gradual thing, the water flowed northwards here, and there was a lake down around Fairhaven Bay near Walden, where there was a lake Cochituate, and that broke through, and gradually all of this stuff has become pretty alluvial. We have big floods in the spring, and that has created a lot of excellent soil like you get along the Nile when there's an annual flood. So it was the agriculture potential of Concord that caused the people to leave the coast, you know, from Salem and Boston and various places in the South Shore and Plymouth. All the colonies were sort of next to the coast where they could take a boat back to Mummy England. But not so here in Concord. This river is much too shallow for any ocean-going vehicle. These are rather pretty. I believe they're black-eyed Susans. They're in the sunflower daisy family. Rather pretty. It's interesting, these other plants growing among the black-eyed Susans, which are from the Midwest. I'm not sure they're native to New England. But brought over by the Pilgrims back in 1620 was this particular plant. It's not very pretty. It's in the snapdragon family. It just has little patches of yellow flowers. It's never completely yellow, not that attractive. But it has several values. One is the leaves are very soft and absorbent and are emergency toilet paper, much better than poison ivy. And the other thing, the reason the Pilgrims brought it over here, it's not edible, but these long stalks they would dip in wax. And they had no flashlights back then, and the wind might blow off a stick that was on fire. But with the wax, this was sort of like a candle. And so when they were going from home to home or whatever they were doing in the evening, they would dip this in wax, set it on fire, and it apparently would burn for quite a while. So anyways, it's an interesting plant that they brought over it's called mullein, M-U-L-L-E-I-N. But apparently one of the plants brought over by the Pilgrims intentionally, but this was their flashlight. So thank you for watching our little series. We don't have a name for it. Maybe Wanderings with Henry in Concord today. Today we attempted to reach into his waterways where he may have canoed, and including the wonderful trip he took up to New Hampshire on that week in the Concord and Merrimack River and so forth. So we visited Egg Rock where the visitors come to see where Concord started, basically, in a place that he canoed by often. And then we did go over to Great Meadows, which was an area for natural history observation by Henry and many of his followers. And then we've also been to the Old North Bridge, famous back in the American Revolution days, and photographed the Concord River there. But the rivers are a very important part of Concord, having 3 rivers in one town, along with lakes and ponds and some decent hills and protected forests and farms. It's a good mix of different habitats, just far enough from Boston to feel like you're out in the country, but close enough to Boston to commute to any jobs if you're lucky enough to have one that pays decent bucks to allow you to live in Concord. But we hope you've enjoyed this, and in the coming months we're hoping to do a few more little wanderings around Concord with Henry today. Thank you for watching.